Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. Got a big show for us, I guess for everyone today, as it is NFL Draft Week. But there was breaking news this afternoon that comes out to some heavy hearts, I guess, across Pennsylvania. Because there were the college basketball FBI trials are continuing. And Adam Zagora, I hope I pronounced his last name correct, was at the trial, and he said that Marty Blazer said that between 2010 and 2014, he paid football players, not just basketball players. And this guy is significant because he was already named in the sanctions from the University of North Carolina football team. And I will say one thing, tying into that, because North Carolina was one of the schools named today, that these trials did not protect the players' names at any cost. Because, I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but this is how they addressed it. They said he paid one client who was a first-round draft pick from the University of North Carolina to the New York Giants. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that North Carolina has almost 0 first-round picks in football, to be able to track that down and find out that it was Hakeem Nicks that was the wide receiver that was drafted by the New York Giants. So you know exactly who they paid. You might as well just gave his name. If you're going to give that much detail, I mean, it's not like these schools are having a slew. I know Alabama's one of the ones named here. I'll give all the names and why it's significant. Because we have schools from both the ACC and the Big Ten, the two conferences we cover most. But we also have UNC. Well, I guess that's from the ACC anyway. Alabama, then Notre Dame and Pitt round out the ACC schools. And you have Penn State, Michigan, and Northwestern named from the Big Ten. And I will say that these are significant because they're not recruiting violations. So Marty Blazer, he was a financial advisor, and what his scheme was, he offered players money while they were playing college that, hey, I'm going to give you some money up front, sort of like a loan, that if you make it in the professional leagues, you pay it back and you become one of my clients. It's very similar to what happened with Reggie Bush out at USC. So UNC, I believe they were punished. I don't know if this was due to whenever they had their whole academic scandal, this was one of the things that was investigated. And I believe Hakeem Nicks' name is scrapped from all of the records down here. But I don't know if they actually got sanctions over it. But the NCAA has said that they are cleared from any other investigation based on that. Now, the other big ones, at least from the area here, in Pennsylvania, you have Pitt and Penn State. Penn State's is significant because it implicates Larry Johnson. And again, the NCAA gave very specific, pinpointed questions so that you know exactly who they're talking about. They said a position coach that had a son in the NFL, and that only person on Penn State staff at that time was Larry Johnson. He's now the defensive line coach at Ohio State. So they said that he tried to persuade one of their players from taking $10,000 from entering the NFL draft. He did not take the money. He declined it. But Larry Johnson, the Blazers on record by saying Larry Johnson really pressured the kid. And of course it was a no-brainer for him. I think he was drafted number 11. His name's escaping me. Of course, they didn't have it in there. But it was a defensive tackle, I believe, for Penn State. Drafted 11th overall. So you're going to get so many millions of dollars. $10,000 to stay at Penn State isn't really worth it. So I'd like to get your thoughts, Matt, before I go any deeper on this.
It kind of shocked me, to be honest, because I thought for as tight of a ship as some of those schools run, that you would think that they would be more on the up and up, especially being that, you know, with the schools like Pitt, with Penn State, with Notre Dame, there are schools that kind of really push the high moral standard, and it's just kind of shocking that it goes there as well.
Well, to be fair, it's not really. This is kind of a strange, I guess, investigation because it's not really on the schools, at least in my opinion. And I've hated this from the beginning, and it's not just because Michigan's named, but this is one booster that the players are already at the school. So it's not like the traditional bagmen where you're getting money to sign. You were already there. He's giving you a loan. Basically, you are going to make money off of your likeness, which as a previous college athlete, I know you should be able to make it. I'll go on record saying that. If you want to sell autographs or whatever, if people are willing to pay for your name, I think you should be able to make money off that. If some guy wants to loan you a car, which we know is going on right now across the NCAA, and expects you to pay for a brand new car when you get drafted, like that should not matter. And this is so much different than paying players under the table or anything like that. He's giving them a loan. He's offering them a service for when they reach the NFL. And I think that's why you get Pitt, for as bad as they were under those years, they were still getting high draft picks. I don't know if Aaron Donald came out during those years, but I mean, you're having great players come out of Pitt. So he's really only targeting one or two guys. He's not just willy-nilly throwing around 10 grand to everybody on the team. He's picking guys that are going to get drafted high, throwing them some money, and then hoping that they hire him later, knowing that he's going to make a huge chunk of money from them back. So I really don't think that they should tie the schools down in this. I don't think Reggie Bush, which was a similar situation, he should never have been punished at all. I think USC should give him an honorary Heisman just to stick it to the NCAA. And I hate to see some of the already sharks are out on social media posting to the NCAA, writing letters saying that they hope that schools' wins are vacated. And I think that's the worst punishment just because of how stupid it is. I get it if you want to punish them, but if you're a school, still publish those wins. Like, no one's stopping you. If Alabama can claim a national championship where they lost their bowl game to the eventual national champion, Notre Dame, like, why not just claim those wins? So I think it's a whole waste of time. If a player wants to make money, let him make money. I saw an article today where they have the crying Northwestern fan from the NCAA basketball tournament a couple years ago. He was like the son of like Northwestern's athletic director or something, and they got eliminated, and there was a picture of him with his hands above his head. He got offered $50,000 to be in a commercial. If you were a college football player, why couldn't you be in a commercial for $50,000 if you wanted to be? And I think that's where the system is messed up. You're going to let some random kid that was crying make $50,000 off of his likeness, but you're not going to let Hakeem Nicks make some money in a loan that he has to pay back anyway? How is that different than student loans? But you have anything else to add on that?
I think you just made some really good points with the way that system was set. However, the one thing that I would say with it is that you're seeing the end game of people that want to they have an axe to grind. And it's like, if they have an opportunity to really take somebody down, they're taking their shot. And that's the aspect that I don't like, is that if these schools are found guilty, then what is going to be the appropriate punishment? Because you see with some schools, they get ticky-tack, and the next one, they get the book thrown at them. And I think that there's, we've complained about it a lot on this show, where I want to see something more consistent. And it's okay for the NCAA. I'd rather have them say, we want to just start to set a standard of whatever it is, with whatever policies that they have, and then be consistent with it. That's all I really want, is to just, if you're having some kind of recruiting violation, what's the consequence? It's like, well, we'll kind of just figure it out case by case.
Yeah, and I agree. I think they should have a hard rule, almost like a penalty that you would get by the law. Like if you're speeding and you get like a certain amount over, they say the limit is like a $500 fine or whatever. Like, you ever see those signs driving down the road through like a construction zone? why not just have those through the NCAA? If you get a loan for under 10 grand, whatever, it's like a 1-game suspension or something. And some of these happened a long time ago, like the Penn State years. That I think Joe Paterno was still there for a bulk of those, at least in the early one that they mentioned Larry Johnson, I believe. Michigan was all under Brady Hoke, and even the Penn State ones, those don't overlap with James Franklin being there. So at that point, what do you realistically do? The only thing you can actually do from the NCAA perspective is go back and erase those wins. But a lot of the schools here, outside of Alabama, they weren't really winning anything. Michigan under Hoke was awful. Pitt during those years was pretty bad. Northwestern didn't win anything. So you're really only punishing Alabama if you go that route. And again, like you said, are you going to be consistent? Are you not going to pick and choose? I mean, I think what UNC had to do was they had to disassociate with Hakeem Nicks. So maybe that's the route they take, where they're not allowed to mention him in the record books or the players that were paid. But again, then they have to start their own investigation and try to get Blazer to name these athletes. Because even though it's in court records, they can't really guess on who the players are. So I honestly don't think they can do anything. But we'll see what happens. And I hope it comes more comes out of this, and I hope that they start to pay players, or at least let them make money off of their own name. Because I think that's where it's going. With that, we also get NCAA football back, and you might get some fake names because players don't sign off. But at that point, who cares? I guarantee most of the rosters would sign up to make $50 or $20, whatever it is, to have their name in a video game. Because that's some of the offers that you do get when you're a college athlete. You'll get whatever the stipend is. I mean, I got a stipend playing D3 baseball. You can't tell me that these D1 athletes aren't getting stipends. It just comes down to, okay, give them the stipend and then get whatever comes above that. If they can sell their name to EA Sports to be on the cover of NCAA football, great. That's only going to be 1 or 2 guys. That's not the entire league. So start with that. And other sports, if you're worried about them, have them market themselves. I think it's only better for the NCAA, because then you'll see some of the other sports start to push themselves more on social media, and you might get some more exposure for sports like lacrosse and soccer that are starting to make a bigger push here in the United States. But that's just my opinion. You have anything else to add on that before we get into high tempo?
Nope.
All right. For my high tempo, before I forget, the NCAA, sticking with them, they had some new rules for college football. And the big one is overtime. After Texas A&M and LSU last fall went to 7 overtimes, they agreed that it was too long. It was over a 4-hour game, and player safety was drawn into concern. So at the meeting this year, they are limiting overtime to 5 overtimes. After the 5th overtime, if it is still tied, players or teams will line up and instead start to alternate 2-point conversion tries, much like we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago with the new XFL rules. And to be honest, I like it. And I don't even think that they should have went 5 overtimes. I think they could have very easily done 2. You get your shot on offense, you get your shot on defense, or maybe even 4. Why 5? At least 4, it's evened up. You're on defense first, then you're on offense, then it reverses. So then you're on offense first and then defense. If it's still tied after 4 overtimes, just start to go to sudden death. Because in the 5th, one team has an advantage. Whatever team is on offense 3 times is always going to have an advantage. That's just weird that they would choose that. So I would have cut 1 more off, or like I said, just go to 2 and then start to get into more of the meat. Because a lot of these overtimes games, they don't matter at all. Realistically, they don't. So, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of lean in that direction with you.
Just let the games be over. They used to have ties, and you can go back through the records and see that ties didn't really affect. I mean, I guess there were some years where a team was tied, and it might have kept them out of the national championship game, but back in those days, they really didn't have the national championship game. So to be fair, a tie wouldn't keep you out of your conference race. If anything, it would be just like what happened to the Steelers last year in the NFL. It's going to be the deciding factor. That tie is going to get rid of the tiebreaker.
But I think it's like that LSU game was an outlier. Like, there's very few. I would assume that most games that go into overtime, within one or two overtimes, end up finishing. So I almost think like it's an extra barrier that in the event of something really, really crazy happening, they have that to fall back. They have something to default and fall back on. So I see where they're going at with it, and it does make it. It is looking out for the players. Will someone inevitably get screwed in it? Probably. But, after 2 or 3 cracks at offense and defense, I would hope that maybe your team steps up and makes the plays that they need to not be in that situation in the first place.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that they already pretty much end really quick, so why not just cut them after 2? I think you would see a lot of teams just trying to get that field goal if they get the stop on defense to send it to 2-point conversions. Or even if the first team kicks a field goal, hey, let's just line up, kick our field goal, and then start to do 2-point conversions because we have the advantage with a running quarterback or whatever the issue is. I just think it would be more exciting for games that realistically don't matter because most of the time there's not overtime in the big games, and when it does happen, it's rare. It's usually the lead-in game that you don't care about between 6-win Indiana and 6-win Illinois. And you're sitting there watching it, and you're like, why can't they just start this Michigan-Penn State game already? Like, stop this madness. Quit showing this overtime. I don't care. So, that's my beef with it. What do you got for high tempo this week?
Gonna stick with our Le'Veon Bell drama. So, the NFL's starting its voluntary workouts and signed the big contract, and surpriser, Le'Veon Bell's a no-show at Jets camp for some of their off-season mini workouts, some of their mini camp stuff. Like, it clearly looks like Pittsburgh's coming way out ahead in that ordeal, letting the headache go and continuing to do selfish things.
Well, of course, everyone knew it was going to be an issue. We've been talking about it for, I feel like, a year and a half, if not 2 years. We've complained about him. If you're a locker room cancer once, you are always going to be a locker room cancer.
But the thing was, like, his whole issue was pay me. I miss football. I love football. Blah blah blah. He holds out. He then walks, gets the contract with the Jets, and then is like working on his like rap videos. Like, if you really are like making the comments about loving the game, you'd be there.
Everyone knew he wasn't going to show. I mean, I would have predicted that. It's going to just come down to he gets the money, he continues to whine. We see it with players all the time. They don't get that work ethic instilled in them. They're not going to change. Just because you paid him, he's not going to change his personality. Same with Antonio Brown. You could put him under, the only coach that you always change for is Belichick, if we're being honest.
But I just wonder, what is it that he does that's so much different? Because I look at this, and the reason that I found it interesting was the fact that it's a culture issue. It's when you're looking at successful teams that win, and whether you're looking at high school, college, or pros, the teams that are willing to put the work in the off-season programs are the ones who are continuously the high-end performing teams.
He doesn't pay big contracts for headaches like these guys. And I think that's where the culture stems from. You're there, you know, hey, we're going to compete for championships. If you want to go get your money, you're free to go. And I think players know that. It's almost like the SEC. I don't think that they have a television contract that you can't get out of. So if you're a school that wants to leave the SEC, you're free to go. And guess what? We never hear of any schools trying to leave. But then you have the Big 12, on the other hand, that has that in place, and now everyone's on the countdown for, okay, when they can start to get their money, are they just going to go to another conference where everyone splits equally? Just because, that they're trying to get championships and it's not all about the money. I honestly think that's where the culture stems from. You have an expectation. I want to get my ring. Where else would you play? I mean, you're going to get better endorsement deals if you're playing in February, not if you're eliminated by December and people forget about you.
If you're eliminated in December, then it gives you that much more time to work on your individual.
But outside of fantasy football, I would guarantee that a lot of these casual fans don't know who these big-time regular season heroes are. How many people do you think know who David Johnson is?
Probably not many.
If you're a fantasy guy, you exactly know who he is. If you play fantasy football, you know who David Johnson is. If you're some guy's mom, some kid's mom that just bought her son a Tom Brady jersey, do you think she knows who David Johnson is now? No? Any other fan, casual fan, they're not going to know who these guys are, these fantasy heroes. So it's like a weird spot for the league. Are you going to be playing in the big-time games? And it's the names that you see over and over and over again. You've been hearing about Tom Brady for like 20 years almost. Then you've been hearing about Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, guys like that have been in the playoffs. As long as you're in the playoffs, doesn't matter if you win. Look at Ben and Aaron Rodgers as my examples. Recent history. I picked them out for a reason. They don't have to win big time. But their names are always mentioned in the preseason. They're always up for MVPs, and yet they are always getting commercials in January. And that's all that matters. Get the name out there. I mean, even Eli Manning. He won 2 Super Bowls. He could have been promoting himself better. Like his brother. I mean, his brother wasn't winning Super Bowls every year, but he sure had a hell of a lot of commercials for pizza and all kind of other random stuff in January while he's playing his games. So get in there, get your name known, and Le'Veon Bell's going to find that out with the Jets. If they don't make the playoffs, like, who cares if he's making that money? And that if that's his last contract, I hope he's saving it. And I think that's where I wish the NFL would step up and give some more financial assistance to some of these guys. So, I don't know. Got anything else on that?
Well, on the flip side, I saw Pittsburgh's trying to renegotiate Roethlisberger's contract and potentially give him an extension. They're hoping to have that done by the time camp rolls around. So I think that taking that in the opposite direction, there you have Roethlisberger, who's going to be restructuring his contract, adding years. More than likely, he's going to be penciled in, retiring as a Steeler. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I've always hoped that he would. I mean, it's very rare that you see a guy play his entire career for the same team. And it looks like it's going to happen with Tom Brady. And Pittsburgh has a similar quarterback. Of course, not as many Super Bowls, but he has multiple Super Bowls. And I think it would have been idiotic for Pittsburgh to do anything other than keep him. I mean, look at Chipper Jones. That legacy that he had with Atlanta, they were able to keep him. Then they also get to keep that glory on his Hall of Fame induction. And anytime he comes on, it just lists the Atlanta Braves. Like, you know that these guys are going to come back around. Look at how they promote Bill Cowher. People still remember him as head of the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though he's on whatever show he does on the NFL Network or Fox or whatever, CBS maybe.
CBS.
Because he's tied to that one team. He didn't get kicked out of Pittsburgh and then end up coaching the Bengals for 5 years. So, you don't have that split. And I don't want to see that happen with Roethlisberger. I really, honestly think that it hurt Joe Montana because he went to the Chiefs. If he would have won a Super Bowl with them, it would have been a different story.
Almost did it with Marcus Allen running back.
And I know he was close. And that's why I said I think it would be a different story. But the fact that he left, he loses that legacy. Same with a couple other quarterbacks that you can just go through who leaves at their tail end of the career, like a Brett Favre. If he bows out gracefully with the Packers, guess what? He's still going to be loved by Packers fans as Aaron Rodgers is struggling. But because he left.
I often wonder, how much of Favre leaving was in part the fact that they had Aaron Rodgers, and as the year started to mount up, and they're like, we need to find out what we got in Rodgers, that they're going to say we're looking to move him up on the depth chart. If it wasn't you're going to end up having to play in a backup role, and he just said, no, I'm not, and that was a way that he could get out around that, you know.
But you don't think that he could have just retired?
But if he still felt like he could play, which obviously playing for 2 more teams after the fact, he felt like he had more. But if the Packers are like, I think we're going to go with the younger guy.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I just don't know. Like when you're
the equivalent would almost be that you would think if Belichick was serious about like really coaching a lot more years, inevitably he's going to have to find someone to replace Brady. So let's say that he drafts the quarterback from Duke and says, you know what, year 2 in, I think he's going to be the man. This is the direction we want to go in. And Brady still feels like he can play. Does he opt out and try to go somewhere else to spite him? You know, I don't know.
At that point, I would hope that it wouldn't come down to that. You would think that Robert Kraft, the owner, would step in and say, hey, it's much more marketable if we keep Tom Brady a Patriot. We don't want him going to name a random team and winning a Super Bowl like Peyton Manning did with the Broncos. Now what does he do? What is his legacy? Is Manning a Colt? Is he a Bronco? That was a piss poor Super Bowl for the Broncos. So that makes that even a stronger statement. Where do you remember him as?
Well, I remember him with the Colts, but the thing that I think of with that is from a team development standpoint, you look at what Bill Walsh was able to do, how he transitioned from Joe Montana in the early years and then shifted it to Steve Young. And had he have stayed, I think that those teams could have potentially been even better than some of his teams with Montana quarterbacking, had he have stayed and continued to develop, because he started to have, essentially, I think he has what Belichick has now, where he has his guys, his program from the top to the bottom. It was his, and with having that much control over everything, I think that was a model that shows how to continuously look to move guys out. Because I like one of the quotes I heard is that they tried to move guys while they still had maybe 2 or 3 years left, knowing that then they had time they would be getting something out of those players or something for those guys they were trying to get rid of.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point you brought up that Niners team, because it's very similar to the Brett Favre situation where they had to see what they had in Steve Young, because he was already, I think he was older coming out because he went to BYU.
Yeah.
I think they do mission trips, so he was already older. He was in the league for a while. They almost had to give it to him. And I'll agree with you. I think that Walsh team from 94, if he was even still coaching that year, that was one of the greatest teams of all time. They had Deion Sanders on defense. And so, I mean, yeah, you can make that gamble. That one paid off. But if you make the switch and they don't pay off, then you're kind of just left with a legacy. Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl. Great. That decision looks good in hindsight. But if you push Tom Brady out for a guy that ends up with 8 wins, I mean, it's not worth the risk. He has the most Super Bowls. I think that's a special case scenario. Let's say Russell Wilson, on the other hand. After a while, you know the Seahawks are going to push him out. It's a given.
Yeah, being that he just signed that big contract.
Yeah, he'll either play that contract out, and they'll realize that they haven't been winning with him, and they're going to go ahead and push him out even though he won a Super Bowl, or they just force him to retire, and he either retires, John Elway style, most likely not on top though, or he does the Brett Favre and says, you know what, I'm going to bounce around for a bit. I'm going to go to your rival at the 49ers. I know it's been a dumpster fire there for about 2 decades, but I'm going to go there and see what happens and go from there. So, I mean, you have a couple different situations, but we'll see. I hope Roethlisberger stays for his whole career. I know we got off on a bit of an NFL tangent there, but let's get into the NFL draft. Needs for the Steelers. Linebacker and secondary help. First round, picking, I think, 20th. What do you think they go with?
Hopefully they go with best player available. I felt like they went with the Edmonds pick last year in the first round and tried to justify or like that he's this hybrid player that they can use in these multiple roles, and I feel like they're in a spot where I don't know that their needs are going to match up with what's going to be available when they get there. In a perfect world, I'd love to see them end up with Devin Bush because I think he would fill a couple different roles for them, but I just realistically don't think that he's going to be there when Pittsburgh comes to draft. The only way that I could see that happening is if they potentially could make a move to move up, which is not something that they typically do. I know they made they did jump up for Polamalu, which was a phenomenal move. I think he has the potential at linebacker to be that kind of player for them, but I don't know if they would go that route. To me, I think they've addressed some of those issues. They picked up Barron from the Rams. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be there for a long time, but is he going to improve the linebacker core? Absolutely. You know, I think that Pittsburgh's done a great job in the past of drafting wide receivers. So even though you're missing Brown, you still have the possibility of adding someone in the later rounds to address that need. Plus, they signed Dante Moncrief, who I think is going to quietly be a good veteran player for them that's going to help in the locker room and help with these younger players, get them to understand because he's not there, obviously, to sign. He didn't sign a big contract. He's there to win.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about Devin Bush being there at 20. And unfortunately, I just don't see it happening. And I'm used to Michigan guys falling down the line. And I love Devin Bush. I love the way he plays. I think that his biggest knock, he's a little undersized. Now in the NFL, does that matter? No. Not as much as what everyone makes it out to be. But I have seen him make quite a few bad reads in the hole. And with that being undersized, when he does that, if he shoots the wrong gap, then he's blown out of the play. Like he can't recover like someone that was bigger could, knocking over a pulling guard or a fullback or some other tight end, blocking down. Like a bigger linebacker can fight through that block. Devin Bush can. Now what he does have is speed, and that's what the Steelers severely lack right now. So I would say, if he can get that, if they can get that speed at their pick, great. And you're right, go with the best player regardless of position or irregardless, whatever it is. Don't try to pigeonhole yourself just because you have a need if you don't think you can fill your needs in the second or third round. Even the fourth round, I would say, you can get productive players. Fill your needs in the first round and arguably the second round. Always take the best players because then who knows? They could turn into all pros, Pro Bowl type players every year. So I really hope that they can make a move and see it happen. Devin Bush has been getting so many first round grades or top 10 grades that I would just be shocked if someone didn't take him. If he fell, that would be a phenomenal pick. And I've seen multiple Pittsburgh newspapers write about how Bush is a realistic pick for the Steelers. And I'm just saying, fans out there, don't get excited because that would be an amazing drop.
Well, one of the things that could potentially happen, and you see this every year, is where you start getting a run on quarterbacks because it's become more of a passing league. You have to have – you're either developing a current quarterback or you're looking to develop the one for your aging vet. So – when you start to see some of these guys that have certain grades, you'll see that one or two go off the board, and all of a sudden teams are jumping up to make sure they get their guy. So it could, if you get something like that, there's a good chance that you may end up seeing that happen.
Well, I think some of the guys that they thought might push for the top spot have been falling quite a bit. I know Dwayne Haskins was one out of Ohio State that I thought looked like the pro passer type. Kind of like, even if he wasn't a quarterback that could stick, he was accurate, almost like a Byron Leftwich, where you knew he was big enough to be durable and he could play even if it wasn't a starting position. He could be in the league for a very long time as a backup and a serviceable backup. Like Leftwich came in with the Steelers and he did great for a while there. So I'm surprised to see him falling out of that first round because a lot of people, the other one's Kyler Murray, and I have the Wonderlic scores. Kyler Murray got a 20, which was the lowest out of the quarterbacks that were reported as tested. And that's a position where 20 is one of the ones where that's a score below what the threshold is. There was an article a while back. I don't know if it was done by ESPN or if it was done by one of the NFL's sites, but they said that for a quarterback, all productive quarterbacks basically have scored at least a 25 in the NFL. Because of the way the test is set up, it doesn't really matter for most positions, but for the quarterback, if you can't score a 25 because the test is based on speed, you're going to struggle to make reads in the league. Surprisingly, once that research was published, the NFL they stopped releasing their Wonderlic scores. So I complained last year because I couldn't get scores for Sam Darnold because I had the same feeling watching him throw poor interceptions in college that he wasn't going to be quick enough to make those reads. And now I see the Kyler Murray score. Dwayne Haskins, on the other hand, is right at a 25. They said once you're at 25 or above, there's not really any difference, just based on the years of data that they released to Wonderlic, and I don't even know what the range was. But anyone below that, you have to worry. And I'm just surprised because a couple people did retest that Kyler Murray wouldn't retest. You would think every retest, you're going to get better. Why not give it a shot? You see people redo their 40s all the time. Why not retake the Wonderlic if you know that there's that research published and you get below that score and you're mentioned to be the number one pick? I think Mel Kiper even came out and said that it's a 99% done deal that the Cardinals draft him number one overall. If I'm a Cardinals fan, I'm nervous. Too many signs against that guy. Wonderlic score, didn't pass that test. Height, didn't pass that test. I mean, you're looking at a guy, didn't throw. So you don't know what his arm strength is. I mean, sure, you saw him throw a college football, but does that mean it's going to translate to the bigger NFL football? You're a quarterback guy, Matt. What do you think going in with the quarterbacks that are out there?
Knowing what I saw and knowing what it seems like Cliff Kingsbury's comfortable with, I think he had the chance to work with Murray. He knows what he's getting. If he feels like he can use the same style of offense and he's going to use terms that are familiar to him, then it totally makes sense. But to try to jam him into this, what you see with a lot of quarterbacks with his skill set is they try to hammer him into this West Coast, you're going to follow the route tree and this and that, and they do the tried and true methods. I think he would struggle in that format. But if they're going to take him and you say, here's the air raid concepts, here's the ones that you're comfortable with, which ones do you not want to do, and they tailor it to him, he has every chance to be successful. I think the NFL game is starting to evolve at a much slower rate to what the college game is. So I don't think that it's necessarily a death sentence if you don't have the highest Wonderlic. Now, when you're looking at, like, when you watch the old NFL films and you had John Gruden spouting off a 2 minutes worth of verbiage for an offensive play call, I think if you don't have a big Wonderlic score, I think you definitely would struggle in that type of system, which is why he always looked for older quarterbacks who've been in the league and understand all that, can repeat the terminology.
Well,
but for some,
go ahead.
Bringing Kyler Murray in as a rookie and knowing that you're going to run a similar style of offense as what you've had at Oklahoma, watching that film from last year, you have to be licking your chops because he's going to give you everything that you need to be successful.
Do you think that it is a rental position, though? Like, let's say Kingsbury, I envision his career with the Cardinals to go one of two ways. They're invested in him in the long run, and he's there for 10 years. And this Murray pick is his first shot to just get acclimated with the league. And I feel like it's not going to work out. And after that, he's going to reset. And his real shot isn't going to be until 5 years down the line when he's comfortable with the NFL personnel. Or my other way I see this going is similar to what Pete Carroll did or what Bill Belichick did, where Belichick with the Browns was successful in his own right, still gets pushed out. He's able to then regroup and then bring in his concepts and is very successful and hasn't changed since. Same with Pete Carroll. He was at New England. He was successful in his own right, goes to USC, then he comes back with what he learned, and he's immediately all guns blazing in the NFL. I feel like that's more of the route that I see Kingsbury coming in. He's a little bit too, like you said, the NFL it takes him a while to change, and I feel like he's just getting his feet wet with Arizona, and I honestly feel bad for their fans because I think this is almost like a learning process for him, and so the league has, or the owner of the Cardinals basically has two options. You're training him for another job, or you're riding it out.
And I think if time has proven anything, he's younger, that if the owner and management is smart, they give him the Marvin Lewis treatment and just allow him to grow with the position. And the knock with Marvin Lewis was that he couldn't get himself through the playoffs. He'd make the playoffs, and then he'd be a one and done type coach. But I mean, overall, I would say that he's been above average compared to the league standard. That I think that he could potentially put himself in that position where Arizona's building ish. They have Larry Fitzgerald on his way out. They had some of their key defensive people have been gone from their team that lost the Super Bowl. I think this is the perfect time for them to, if they're going to shift gears, do so drastically and see what happens.
And I'll say, I'll give you a better one than Marvin Lewis. Bill Cowher, Pittsburgh guy. How many people wanted him fired during the Tommy Maddox years? You have a guy with the system. He kept learning, gets to the Super Bowl in 95, doesn't work out. Then he's adapting. He's trying to bring in Cordell Stewart to do some spread type stuff before that was even a thing. Didn't work out. They stuck with him, and then he finally wins the Super Bowl. I feel like that's the type of long-term commitment that Arizona has to decide that they're going to make with Kingsbury. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a gigantic letdown for Arizona fans in 5 years.
And I'll take that a step further. You have Pittsburgh like that, and then look at some of the other more successful teams in the league. You have Belichick in New England. You have, within recent memory, Andy Reid both in Philadelphia and now in Kansas City. Like, he's been there for these longer stretches. It's not like he's doing a one and done and turning it around. They give these coaches these contracts, allow them to work through it, and they're given even Jerry Jones, for as much criticism as he's getting with Jason Garrett as his head coach, they're still they're still making the playoffs. They're still doing things to be a competitive team. Are they winning the Super Bowl? No, but Belichick is, but that's a completely different topic. But you look at some of these other guys, like they're winning, they're getting closer, and sometimes it's an injury, it's a break, it's a catch that should have been a catch or called incomplete that ends up tanking you in the end. So I think you don't fight the knee-jerk reaction. You let them grow season to season so that they have that continuity, and you end up reaping the rewards in the end.
Yeah, it's going to be something that they're going to have to decide on, and we've gone quite long. We've kind of skipped a good bit of our NFL draft talk, just talking about Kyler Murray, because that's going to be the one thing that comes into the league. If he is truly the number one pick, is the league going to make that transition? And we've been waiting for it. And I've said last week, Cam Newton, I think, is the closest we've had to spread continued success in the league. Can someone make that? Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Is it going to be Kyler Murray? Which quarterback is going to be the first one to have an Eli Manning, a Ben Roethlisberger, an Aaron Rodgers type run that isn't a traditional pro quarterback? I mean, Russell Wilson, you could even argue, even though he came from more traditional pro offenses at North Carolina State and at Wisconsin, I mean, Pete Carroll brought that in early. Is he going to be around? Is he going to keep doing it forever? I don't know. So, big NFL draft on Thursday. We'll be covering that, so make sure you check out our site, southboundsports.com. You can find our social media there to keep you up to date with that. I didn't want to go too long and throw off the NHL talk because Pittsburgh Penguins, unfortunately, we talked about it last week. We knew that it was getting down and ugly. They ended up losing, getting swept in 4 games. And personally, I didn't mind the sweep from the Penguins' perspective because they're at the point where they need to reevaluate the team, and keeping guys healthy. If you're not going to win the cup, having Crosby play 8 more games, does it really help him in the long run? It's almost like what happened with LeBron. At this point, if you're not going to make the run, it's better for you just to bow out early and save those games. Save your knees. So I hate the way it happened. And I will say this, NHL, I was looking at the bracket today. Only one favorite going into tonight's games has advanced, and that was the Islanders. All the other series that were over were all won by underdogs. Columbus, Colorado, was it St. Louis? I can't remember which ones were all set in stone early, but all underdogs. And in contrast, we're going to talk about the NBA in a little bit here. NBA, all favorites are winning. So you can't say that hockey is a boring sport when you get to the NHL playoffs. It's all about the matchups and what can happen. I would like to see the Penguins make some moves. I think they're a little bit too comfortable. I would like to see them get a little bit more aggressive this year. But we'll see. There's a lot of hockey to be played, the big ones. And I didn't get an updated score. I think they're playing tonight. The Hurricanes and Ovechkin. We talked about the knockout punch last week that Ovechkin had on one of the Carolina players. Then last night, he gets thrown out of the game because he slashes a player after they wave off his game-tying goal. Or was it 2 nights ago? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was 2 nights ago. He gets his goal waved off because he poked the goalie's pad, and the puck was off his pad into the net. So they wave it off for a goalie interference on Ovechkin. He immediately slashes a player after the Hurricanes hit a wide-open net to basically ice the game. Ref calls it. Ovechkin sarcastically claps in his face, starts swearing at him, gets ejected. And I'll say that I like the way Ovechkin went ahead and tried to get that. Hurricanes play tomorrow anyway. But I like the way that he had the fire to get going. The home team has won every game in that series. So you're down to a Game 7. It's exactly what I wanted to happen, but only if they were going to play the Penguins next round. Stretch that out. Maybe the fiery underdogs, the Hurricanes, would get it done. I know it'd be big down here in Raleigh. I've been seeing a lot more Hurricanes flags flying. So I'd like to see them move on. Ovechkin got his cup, so that's cool. Let's move on and get another team. that's a game I'll be watching. Matt, what are you watching for in the rest of the NHL playoffs?
I'm not watching much of anything at this point. I'll be casually watching because instead I'll be trusting the process. I was disappointed. I felt like watching the Penguins series. It just seemed like they couldn't help themselves taking stupid penalties and putting themselves into shorthanded situations, and it just didn't work out the way that you would have hoped. Because I think had they have played a little bit, they almost played desperate is the feeling that I got watching them. Like they were reaching and committing penalties that just were not very smart, not good plays, and kind of ruined it for me.
I don't think the lines were really set up to their advantage. I mean, shoving your big guys all in the first line, it just isn't a recipe for success. I mean, you get a lot of goals down if you have guys that can make plays in the second and third line, so I'd really like to see them shuffle that up. And it's part of your thing, too. Then you're going to get less turnovers. You see it happen all the time. You get a good shot, it ricochets out, other team takes it down and scores right off of your great chance.
Well, I felt like, and maybe you said this last week, their offense was based off of speed. And as some of these guys either traded, left, moved, they didn't replace that speed with the high-end speed that they had, and they still continue to try to push the puck and push the tempo in a way that I don't think fit the style that they had on the roster. Almost like what we see in the NFL where you just take anyone and just think that you can plug them into your system and make it work. I almost think that that's what happened this past season. I think hopefully the Penguins look at the drawing board and see what they have and try to tailor some of that to the skill set of the guys that they're going to have on the roster.
And I think that's what made it frustrating to watch. Because when they weren't getting those advantages that they were used to getting, it almost became a stalemate where you're just waiting for them to turn the puck over. It's like no one was trying to make that move towards the goal or to try to get something going. And when they did score, it was almost like breathing a sigh of relief. So I will say that it's a lot more relaxing to watch other teams play because you get to see some good hockey. And I know a lot of people are cheering for Ovechkin to lose. So at least the Flyers aren't in it. But I don't know. It should be a great tournament. A lot of underdogs already out. Or a lot of underdogs left, I mean. So we'll see. And the Penguins, I really don't think are that far. They don't need a total rebuild. So we'll see going into next week. I wanted to hit some on the NBA playoff sub before we got into it. Boston and Milwaukee are setting up what is, I think, the best side in the NBA playoffs. The Eastern Conference setting up for the runner-up on the West because they're probably going to lose to Golden State. I'm sure Golden State dropped that game. They're up 3-1, though, now. They're going to advance. I don't see any team in the West beating them. The NBA playoffs have become stale, like I said. All of the favorites are winning right now. All of the favorites are most likely going to advance. And then you're going to see in the second round, does Boston have a chance with their veterans to upset Milwaukee? And then either side, you're going to end up with a very good chance. I'm not high on the Raptors. I honestly think that the East is going to come down to the 76ers versus the winner, whoever comes out of that Boston-Milwaukee series. And I think that's going to be, I think these next two rounds, I honestly think the 76ers are going to handle the Raptors, though. I think they win something like 4-2. I don't think it goes game 7. And I just say that based on, I know Kawhi's had the experience, but the 76ers this year are starting to come together. And then you're really looking at, can they go all the way to the finals? And it really depends on the matchup they get in that conference final. So you're watching the game. They're up big tonight. I assume that they're winning, Matt. But what are your thoughts on the 76ers going forward?
There was a play on during Game 3 that stood out to me, or I guess it was Game 4, that they had the altercation where Embiid scored, and then forget who the guy from New Jersey got in his face, and Jimmy Butler jumped in and ended up getting ejected in the process. And I thought when you're looking at the team and the standpoint of looking after each other, I love the move of sticking up for Embiid. Embiid kind of stepped back and he knew not to get himself involved in it. But I thought for Butler to step in and kind of handle some of that business or take the fight on, it shows that team's coming together. And I think their time to win is right now. They the pieces are there. The process needs to be done. They don't have any more time for rebuilding. The process is right now. They have everything that you would need to win a championship and compete with the opposite side. And I think they could do it this year.
And I think you're right. I think Butler adds to that team to the point that I give him the edge, and that's why I have them going over the Raptors. And that's if the Raptors move on. I don't think that series is complete yet. But,
absolutely.
I mean, having that experience, I know personally, I don't think he's gone what would have been his longest run, maybe with the Bulls.
Yeah.
I don't remember him having a deep a playoff run, but just the experience of being in those games at all. A lot of the 76ers players, they didn't have that. When they made the playoffs, they really didn't make a deep run. So now you have it where, okay, this is how we do things in the playoffs. Hey, you got to stick up for each other. You got to kind of pick your shots. But now we got to start playing playoff ball. And I really think that I know Milwaukee's the favorite in the East. I really think that also favors Boston. The same attitude, because in their series against Milwaukee, you have Al Horford. He is a playoff vet. And then you have Kyrie. Kyrie hit big shots on those Cavs teams with LeBron. He was the guy taking game-ending shots. There's a reason for that. The guy knows how to win. And if you're a Milwaukee fan, you have to be nervous that you're playing them this early in the playoffs. Of all the teams, I think the Boston has the most experience right now playoff-wise in the East. And that's why I think that's going to be the toughest matchup for the 76ers. I believe, did Boston eliminate them last time? Or was it 2 years ago? I can't remember. But you got to get over that hump somehow. I honestly think that if Milwaukee wins, that's the best chance for the Sixers, because they are kind of learning at the same time. And every year you see it in the East, a team wins the division, wins the conference, gets that number 1 overall seed, doesn't make it. Because there's like a LeBron sitting there with the number 2 or 3 seed. Because they know that the regular season doesn't matter, and they're resting and getting their game plan ready for the playoffs, and they don't end up with the best record. I think it was, the Raptors a year or two ago that had the number 1 seed. They didn't make it. Now you have, I think the Big 3, was it the Big 3 year that the Celtics won it all? They might have been a 4 seed. Like, when you have guys that are vets, you don't have to be a high seed. So if you're a Sixers fan or a Boston fan, don't be worried right now that your team's not the number 1 seed. It's not like college basketball, where the number 1 seed advances unless you're on the West with Golden State. Any game comes down to matchups and playoff experience. And I like the Butler factor on the 76ers.
Yeah, and I think that was something that was missing from last year's team.
Oh, 100%.
He definitely has the edge that, like we talked about last year. I don't think that they were battle tested in a way that Boston was, and Boston took them to the chipper. And this year, I'm seeing a completely different style of play from them. They're playing more confidently. They're moving the ball well. It's fun to watch. And I know we don't say that very often about basketball, but you know what? right now they're up over 30 right now, and it's still relatively interesting to watch.
Yeah, and this is how you win. You get in series, you get big leads, you learn how to close out games. When you get to there, by the time they have to face either Boston again or Milwaukee, they've been through a couple rounds. They know what it takes, and I think it's going to be a great series. I honestly think that the Eastern Conference Finals is going to go 7 games no matter what team is in. I wouldn't be surprised if Boston-Milwaukee went 7 games. And like I said, I think the 76ers get it done. So they'll have enough tape on either of those two teams, and it comes down to what you said, Matt. Is the process finally going to pay off? It has to eventually. Otherwise, it just becomes a routine. It's not a process anymore whenever your team just routinely losing. So, that's my final thoughts on the NBA. You got anything else on that?
No, the one thing I will say is I hope that on the Eastern side that they don't push some of those series to 7 games, because if Golden State's just cruising along, then they're definitely going to be fresher come finals time, and it's going to make things that much more difficult to try to knock them off. I'm not saying that the East will, but you know what? I think you stand a better chance if you're as fresh as they are going into the finals.
That's true to a point, but with the NBA, I mean, you're looking at age sometimes plays a factor, and I think that that's what really hurt some of those Boston teams when they had the big 3 and they were all aging vets and they were constantly going Game 7. It really hurts them whenever they go up against a young team like LeBron had put together in Miami. But with Golden State, I mean, they already lost Boogie Cousins. I think he's out for the entire playoffs. So that's your deciding factor right there that's going to be able to put you back in. Because instead of having an unstoppable starting lineup, now there's a chink in that armor. And who knows? They're based on shooting. They're experienced, so I don't think it matters either way. Like, I don't think if they come in off a big break, are they going to be shooting cold? No. Is there going to be an upset? I mean, crazier things have happened. If another team comes out of the West, then if you're the 76ers, it's finals win now. So that's the other factor too. I mean, I'm writing Golden State in, but they still have to play the games, and maybe there's a chance that they get upset, but we'll see, because I really hope that some of the other series are more competitive going forward. That's my biggest beef with the NBA. You can kind of look and see, okay, don't have to care about this game. When's the next matchup? Okay. Let's say April 29th or something. I don't know off the top of my head. Like, that's when I need to start tuning in, because at this point, it really doesn't matter. So, that's my final thoughts for the NBA. I did have a mailbag. We're kind of going long. The mailbag question was about Devin Bush anyway. I saw if there was and of course I didn't write down, the question was, do you think the Steelers should go offense or defense in the NFL draft? Defense, the player that they picked, they hoped, I forget who even wrote it. It was on Twitter. But it was about, would you try to get speed like a Devin Bush at linebacker, or would you try to go offense? And they put the tight end from Iowa, I believe. So
must be someone reading my mind, because that was actually a direction that I was thinking. Because there was 2 different scenarios where I think that has played off well in the past. One of them was in New England, where they had Aaron Hernandez, or they had Gronk, and they drafted Aaron Hernandez. And for the little while both of them were healthy and playing together, they were a matchup nightmare for teams. And while they did let Jesse James go, I think that they're going to need to address the tight end position, and I think that would be that I wouldn't be disappointed if they went that route, because definitely getting some more weapons and being able to convert, get Pittsburgh into some third and shorts where their screen game and short to intermediate passing game would be helpful. One of the things that I think is underestimated, I think that with Connor and with Samuels, I think they're in a good spot, but I think it would be worth looking at to see what values there at running back. Maybe not first round, but definitely something to take a look at.
Yeah, I come down to think of it as who's going to be your best option. And we mentioned it earlier in the show. I don't think you're going to be able to even get a look at Devin Bush. So if you have a chance to grab an athletic tight end in the first round at that pick, you do it. I mean, at that point, it doesn't matter so much offense and defense. I was disappointed last year with the pick of Edmonds in the first round just due to his athleticism. Sure, he was kind of a tweener, and you might be able to fit him. You might be able to mold him as a linebacker / safety. But there were other guys that were more athletic if you're going to take a project route like that. So this year, if you're up there and you have a pick, go with a guy that can contribute immediately and potentially be a long-term fix. If that's a tight end position, great. And then if it doesn't work out and he's not there, then you just take whatever athlete you can get. And maybe there's a big athletic defensive end that falls. There's always going to be someone that falls to that position that's a great steal athletically. And that's where it comes down to coaching. Steelers used to be great at finding those guys in the late first round and building them up. Even if they had to jump up a little bit like they did for Polamalu, if you're able to get a guy that you can build up late in the first round, that is how you can remain in the playoffs every year. You're not drafting in the first 10. You're drafting in the late teens, 20s, almost a 30 spot. So you got to build off that, getting guys that can contribute and fill holes. Then you can take projects later on. Take like the Edmonds, like that could have been easily a second-round pick, and then go from there. I mean, like they did with Samuels. They got him in the fourth round. So do that. Get your guys later and then see if they fit.
People keep trying to make it out to be that Pittsburgh has these they didn't make the playoffs last year, but it wasn't like the team was left with nothing. There's still talent in almost every position on the field. So would it be nice to have some secondary help? Yeah, we've been complaining about it for a while, but you know what else would help? If we could get some kind of pass rush consistently. You know, if they're getting to the quarterback and they're creating more sacks on the defensive line that have all pro players on it, if they can get to the quarterback, then they're going to make the secondary people better, and it doesn't matter who's back there. So some of that just boils down to just executing. And I think if they stick to their board and don't try to reach for a linebacker or try to reach for a safety, I think that it'll play out much better for them. When they try to reach on some of these first-round guys, that's where it comes back to bite them. To me, where they make the most money is second, third-round picks. You know, with drafting Washington last year, I thought, oh, that's kind of a risky pick, but then they moved back in to take Randolph or Rudolph. I thought that was a great move. Them matching the wide receiver up with the quarterback, and I think that has the potential to really play itself out in the long run.
And to your point on getting pass rush and stuff, this is where they got T.J. Watt. So you can grab guys like that are able to make an impact and potentially be Pro Bowl players. So don't be worried if they're not grabbing the biggest name on the board because another team got them early on. Fit your team, fit your mold, get guys with the high motor, and see what happens. So
One win. All we need to do, one win.
And then you're in the playoffs, is all you're saying?
You're in the playoffs.
Beat the Raiders, Matt. It wasn't even one win. You lost to a shit team. With John Gruden, who was tanking, he was doing his own process. Now they have Antonio Brown, so it's like a double whammy. But you got anything for the final bell?
No, just check out the website. Looks good. Check out the store. Get some stuff. It definitely would look good on you. It's definitely comfortable material, and supports us. I'm doing this show for you.
Yeah, we got some stuff coming up. Big NFL draft stuff, and we'll be getting ready for some of the later playoff stuff, and NBA, NHL, and we'll be getting ready for spring football sooner than you know it. So definitely go to southboundsports.com. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends, and we will see you next week.